Hello, horror fans. It's me, Cass,
Kylee.
and we are the Horrorcraft Podcast. And today we have on a very special guest. Our special guest is Tim Shea, the director and writer of Pieces of Amy. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
We're super excited. So this is a film that very deeply tugs at both of our heartstrings and just something that I
Absolutely.
really feel like is a very genre defining film. Like this is a prime example of what horror should be doing in the
Yep.
genre is sparking conversations and talking about things in such a great way. So for those of you who don't know, Pieces of Amy is a film about a woman named Amy who is addicted to oxycodone, and basically she is kind of going down a rabbit hole of just experiences with her and her brother, whether it's her relationship with her mom and the relationship she has with her brother cleaning it up. But she kind of gets entangled with a deadly spirit that kind of takes her on even more of a terrifying journey. And just the way that addiction and family dynamics and everything, real life, rural life, is mixed in is done so great. So we are super excited to have Tim on and get into the things further, but we're going to go ahead and hit the music. So let's go ahead and do that.
Welcome to the Horrorcraft Podcast.
All right, we are back. So I just want to again say that our special guest is Tim Shea. This is his first debut film that he's done, and it's incredible that you're doing this in the horror genre. So of course I have to ask a couple of questions, simple questions first off. But are you a horror fan?
I appreciate you kicking it off that way. Yeah, big horror fan. I've been watching movies since I was a kid, just like everyone. I
Mhm.
moved to Los Angeles in like '99, and I would say that was the first time I started meeting people that were like into film, like capital F film. So I started watching a lot of stuff where I was just like, I did not see this as a kid. Old like Wong Kar-wai movies and John Cassavetes and Jean-Luc Godard, early Martin Scorsese movies. I was just like, this is not the same Martin Scorsese that is making movies right now. This is like a wild experimental filmmaker. And then I would say right around the time I started writing Pieces of Amy was kind of like A24's ascendancy, when that elevated horror genre really kind of came about. And of course I watched Halloween, and of course I watched Friday the 13th. But A24 has, it's how it has become a household name. When someone says, oh, it's kind of A24-ish, like, you know what they mean. It's just sort of like elevated horror. The monster is something to do with the person's trauma, and it hits on a different level than just a slasher film. So seen all the slasher films, seen all the just, crazy existential horror movies. And but yeah, it was really hit a lot by this A24 adjacent genre, where folks are being chased by their own demons in many cases.
Yeah, I love that. I think although I'm not the biggest fan sometimes of A24, just because there are certain times where I feel like there are films, some of the films that I love personally from A24, I think are a lot of films that people don't give enough credit for, where I think others do. I know Kylie and I both are really excited to see how they're going to tie in with Undertone podcast
Yes.
and podcast host. We're really hoping that they do it well, because that is a scary thing. And there's only been one film so far that has been able to catch that existential dread of filming yourself, and that is 825 Forest Road by
Okay.
Stephen
Yes.
Cognetti. He has some scenes in there where self-filming yourself where there's like inanimate objects in the back moving, and it is absolutely terrifying. But it's the same way where it's like the monster inside of you might be the bigger monster than the monster, and it's like generational trauma.
Sure.
But with that said, this is a very subjective question because this question changes all the time for Kylee and I, and it
Most
depends on
definitely. I already know what
who's
you're gonna
asked.
ask.
Yeah, what is your favorite scary movie? That could be all time or right now.
That's a very hard, unfair question. It's this early in the morning. So I'll give you a couple ones. So first of all, I did see Undertone. I was at Sundance. I was a visitor at Sundance, and I got to see a midnight screening of Undertone. And I will tell you, by the time that movie wrapped, I was like, when you're like trying to not look at the screen, you're like, I need to have a moment of like, this is just a movie. And I had to like walk home, and I turned on basketball and had like some ramen. I was just like, I can't just go to bed right now because it looks like maybe something's moving over there or over there. So I won't spoil anything, but you've got an awesome, watch ahead of you. And Undertone is a great film. My favorite horror movie. I just rewatched Possession.
Oh, yeah.
The kind of original, 1981, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So even though these modern horror films have really nailed the like elevated horror, the sort of trauma, Possession is kind of that. And this woman who's cheating on her husband, and he's being cheated on, and the possession is the sort of like mania that they're going through as a result. I will say, horror comes in many forms. Paranormal Activity is really freaking scary because you can't shake afterwards. I would say every Gaspar Noé film, is a horror film, and where you walk away just being like, oh my God, I feel horrible about just life and everything inside of it. I watched, I guess I'll pick this one. I watched and read the screenplay for Blackcoat's Daughter probably 25 times when I was writing Pieces of Amy. Such a cool, simple, well-done concept of like these girls whose parents forget to pick them up for Thanksgiving break. And so they're left at this, place out in, I think they're in New England. And you immediately get it. And just the tone and the humor was awesome. Yeah, I read and reread that film like many, many times while I was writing mine.
Those are great choices. I feel like the hate for Paranormal Activity is so forced. I grew up.
Yeah, it's so unwarranted. Like, I don't care. Anybody who the very first time watched Paranormal Activity left the theater, or when the credits rolled, they questioned, was this real or was this fake? And I think like when you're able to have that ability to do that in a movie, like it's a good movie. I'm a huge found footage fan though, so
Also, you can't go to bed afterwards. Like
No,
Exactly.
you can't. I obviously I live in rural Ohio. I live up by the Lake Erie. Currently live in a more rural area than where I grew up in. And I remember when Paranormal Activity came out, and there was only one theater that was within 45 minutes of us being able to go see it. And my friend I didn't really have a lot of friends who liked horror, and I had one friend who was interested in going to see it. And we went to this one theater. We were packed in with a bunch of other people. And I don't think anybody in that theater knew what to expect. And all of us just left traumatized. And I remember being on the way home, like, is that the same Ouija board that's like hanging out in people's basements? Like, I had friends who had like game room basements that their like parents had, and there were like old Ouija boards. And I remember like looking at Ouija boards different after that. Like, most definitely, like, I just couldn't handle seeing a Ouija board after that. Like, knowing, like, I knew they were bad to begin with, but then like referencing it to that specific, like, I'm like, that's not going to happen here. So that's really funny though, because then that brings it into what I was going to ask you next, which is the story behind Pieces of Amy. So what drove you to make Pieces of Amy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the big one, right? So Piece of Amy, for folks who haven't seen it, I'm assuming that's all of the viewers out
Yes.
there. It's about a young OxyContin addict who becomes possessed by her own demons, right? It's a story of a brother and sister who are trying to get their mom out of trouble. Their mom is sharing the same, addiction as Amy. She meets this rich photographer she tries to con the money out of, and the possession, switches bodies. This man's been possessed for 100 years, and the possession switches to her. So this idea of someone being haunted by something that they're not quite sure is there was the sort of original germ of what I was trying to do. I see, as a first-time writer director, you have no idea what you're doing. I had no idea what I was doing. So I was pulling from a lot of, stuff in the back of your head. When I first moved to Los Angeles in 1999, I started getting these really weird phone calls from back home of friends of mine, good kids, normal kids who were dead, who had overdosed or who were living in a rehab center. And I'm like, that guy, that was like one of the nicest kids in our high school. And they're like, these drugstores were like boarding up all their windows, and they would write, "We don't carry OxyContin here," because kids were showing up with shotguns and trying to steal all the oxys. And so it left me with this weird feeling of like this town that I knew was like a really simple, small, Boston town, working class town that had disappeared. It had turned into this horror film in a sense. And I was also pulling from this other experience. This is kind of a personal one where my parents lost their first child, and they would tell us about this when we were growing up. So they're like, "Tim, you have this older sister. Her name is Amy. She passed away, before she was born. But we always, keep her as part of our family story." And as a kid, you don't fully process that stuff. And I think when I had kids and came out here, I was just like, oh, there's this story in my head of a woman who may or may not exist, or whose timeline is very unclear, or what if the timeline was different. So I was trying to weave maybe these two haunts together somehow. Osgood Perkins of Long Legs fame and Blackcoat's Daughter fame has this great quote where he's just like, when you're writing a movie, it's like solving a crossword puzzle. You have no idea what it is, but you got to solve, 6 down before you get 10 across. And I was like, yeah, there's something about sort of discovering the story that I definitely went through. So it's a very, very wild and meandering journey, but based on a lot of the stuff I experienced growing up, and then when I moved out here in LA.
That's incredible.
That really is, because I think especially just with opiates, especially just here in Ohio, like where I live is like in southern Ohio, like Sauter County, Portsmouth. And it was one of the hearts of like the true like opioid epidemic. Like there was these, pain doctors on every corner. It's a poor rural town, and it's just been ravaged by opiates. And like back home in Springfield, it's pretty much like the same way. And when I started just using drugs, I wasn't really quite old enough for the like Oxycontin scene. It was just more of the other types of opiates, but eventually just heroin. Because I think especially a lot of these doctors were just handing out these pain pills like candy. I mean, my father, I miss him terribly, but he suffered from chronic pain and had a hurt back, and they gave him just large amounts of opiate pain medication, and then they cut him off. And at that point, like, he was addicted. But I just think there's so many stories I have as well of just people I went to school with and friends that have died from overdoses, just people that you would not think would turn out, to be addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I think it's torn apart a lot of families, a lot of towns, and it's really sad.
That's right.
Yeah, it's something that's still happening because, I mean, for one, as long as I've been friends with Kylee, she has lost an absorbent amount of people to the drug epidemic. And I've been unfortunate to lose some people in my life too to the drug epidemic. My former co-host lost both her brother and her cousin in the same like 90-day period from drugs. But I can definitely understand why people get looped into that because like I just recently had an issue kind of similar to Kylie's dad where I have a slip disc and I'm under pain management and they were giving me an absorbent amount of gabapentin. And like Kylie was one of the few people that were like, this seems kind of crazy. And I kept feeling like, am I crazy? I need to be listening to these people because they're doctors. But it really was messing me up and like making the switch from that to something else. But like their answer always is like, okay, well, you're taking this. And if you do go into the emergency room and you have something going wrong with you, we're going to give you this pain shot and this and that, and then slap you out on your way. And there's really no other solutions going forward. So you really could kind of see how that kind of funnels into then people trying to go and find alternative ways to get help with their pain because they've gotten addicted to different things because of like this core source. So I think your film really does a good job at explaining that because we have like this source event where it's Amy and her brother who are trying to like figure out what's going on with their mom. Their mom obviously is like the beginning of the oxycodone journey for Amy. And then it's her brother trying to get her out while she's focused on their mother. And then it's like those clash of demons. So Amy is a very important character in this movie, obviously, because it's Pieces of Amy. Can you explain how working with Shelby did you mold the character of Amy?
Yeah, I mean, we could do the whole podcast on Shelby. Shout out to Shelby Park.
Oh, she's I just want to say, Shelby, if you're ever
Fantastic.
listening to this, you're a star. Like
Yeah.
you're the next Maxine.
Yeah.
Like you're a
Yep.
star. You know,
Yep.
you should be everywhere after this. Like if I ever find out that somebody that we know is casting, I will be the first person to add you to a list of people that I'm throwing their way.
Yep.
So
she might be the only one that doesn't know that she's a star. She's extremely humble. But I will tell you, yeah, like, so when I was originally writing Amy, I was thinking of her as like Maika Monroe and It Follows. Obviously, there's a lot of echoes of my story and It Follows arc. When I looked at that movie again, it's interesting. So her character is just this like sweet kind of girl next door, and she says it at one point in the film. She goes, I'm just looking, I just want a boyfriend. We could kind of hold hands and have like a sweet kind of life together, right? And I think it fits that story well. I read so many actors for all my parts, right? But I was out there looking for this sort of blonde girl next door type of figure. I figured this is the perfect, horror siren. And Shelby popped up in Backstage West or Actors Access. And I remember thinking, I recognize this girl. I follow her on Instagram. I'm like, I recognize this girl. And she came in and read for Taylor, which is so funny now watching the final film. You're like, she's not Taylor.
yeah.
And I said to her, I was like, listen, I would love to call you back, but unfortunately, I don't want to call you back for Taylor. Unfortunately, I want to call you back for the lead. I think you might really work as Amy. And she came back and I had her read against a couple other Taylors. And it was like instant. I was just like, oh, not only am I going to offer her this role, but the character it's her. It's sort of like maybe Shelby adjacent. And oh my God, she brought so much like empathy and so much, she's such an enigmatic person, in real life. And it's so interesting now watching her on screen and knowing her in real life. It's just like all that like yelling and ferocity and like all that stuff. I'm like, wait, is that buried inside you somewhere? Because it doesn't manifest when I see you in real life. She is great. And I'll leave you with one story on Shelby. When she showed up to set, we just rehearsed for like 2 months, I want to say. She showed up on set with a copy of her script. and there was like 1,000 little post-it notes all over the script, and I was just like, oh, you like really prepped for this, like you really came prepared and ready to go. So she was awesome. She definitely changed my vision for who Amy was. And then you sort of build the universe around that person. They become your center of gravity. So yeah, shouts out to Shelby Parks for just crushing it and winning an award for Best Lead Actor in a feature. No, she's great.
She was.
Yeah,
She was fantastic. I saw so much of myself in Amy's character and how she acted, and just that careless, not being afraid of danger, but just being also kind of really naive to it and putting herself in certain situations that could harm her. And I just saw so much of myself in her. The nightmares, just the sketchy situations with photographers. It was just very refreshing, and I just felt so seen. And I think people need to be making more movies like this, because addiction is horrifying. I think we focus too much a lot of times on what an addict does when they're using, but I remember thinking when I was in the mix of drug addiction, like I truly thought there was something wrong with me and that I was evil and almost like possessed, because like, why couldn't I just stop? You know what I mean? So the fact that you've taken that and made it like she was possessed by something, like I felt so seen by that.
That's honestly, that's awesome to hear. One thing I was watching while I was writing, there was this documentary about fentanyl, and they go and they interview this guy on the sidewalk, and he's at some kind of soup kitchen set up, and he's kind of getting some help, and they're interviewing him, and he's like totally lucid, like totally grounded, totally sober at that moment. And he starts talking about, yeah, you know, I'm addicted to fentanyl, and I've been living on the street, and my life is totally ruined, and you know, now here I am, homeless. And I'll tell you, look straight in the camera, and he goes, and I'll tell you, despite everything I just said to you, when homeboy shows up in, you know, an hour or so, I'm gonna buy a ton of shit from him, and then you won't see me for 72 hours. I'm gonna go on, and I'm totally powerless against it. And I remember watching that and being like, oh, yo, this is a possession story. The story of like opioid addiction, any addiction, but opioid specifically, where people just get completely taken over. And it's almost like it's sort of driving you, you know, in your brain, sort of driving you around. I was like, yo, that is scary as hell. I totally understand why people have written horror films for the last, you know, hundreds of years, where they've seen people go into these manic, paranoia, you know, schizophrenic states. This is what some of these drugs are doing to people. So yeah, it's wild.
It is. I think like for just especially a lot of people, just with the opioid epidemic, we all started out doing pain pills. And I just don't think we didn't truly understand what we were in for. And there's just so many, like, you want to stop, but you're driven by this, because if you don't have it, you're sick. And when you're sick, you feel like you're dying. It's you look like Reagan from The Exorcist, you know. But it's hard, and a lot of people just don't make it out alive. A lot of horrific things happen to you, especially just as a woman. I remember I came across just creepy photographers that wanted to take pictures of me and would pay me for it. And just thinking of just some of the situations I put myself in, like, I'm just so happy and grateful that I'm alive and nothing horrible, bad. I mean, definitely bad things happen to me, but in those types of scenarios, nothing happened to me. And yeah.
I feel like too, Kylee and I had a very profound discussion last night about this, kind of preparing for this. Obviously, I've never dealt with addiction, but I have dealt with just being in a place of my life in grief where I made really bad, fucked up decisions. And I could just see myself so much in Amy during that, of just trying to cling on to this one thing, this one hope of surviving and like getting her mom out. And I just remember feeling that way, not making bad decisions. I would definitely say if I was an addict of anything, it would be like loving the wrong people. And I definitely put myself in situations and just things in life that were not great. I mean, I'm a domestic violence survivor. And I know a big thing for me being in my relationship with my son's father was like being addicted to the feeling that like I deserved this in a way. And you see that so much in Amy's character where she feels like in a lot of places she deserves how she feels. And like even when the possession is taking hold of her, you do see this like her while she's losing grasp with reality, you do see her kind of almost like being like, this is what I deserve, then I just need to do this to move forward. And I think just the way that you portrayed that, especially during this point in time in history where we have so much going on, where like powerful people getting exposed and like the way that women are being, the women behind all of that, I think that that just hits so hard with anybody who's ever had to deal with a power imbalance like that and felt taken advantage
Yep.
of. And I think that that's such a powerful message in this, even taking away the but then adding those layers on top of it. Like, this is what horror filmmaking should be about. Like, really, truly, I'm not just trying to conflate you
Absolutely.
because you're here, but like, I really, truly, like, it is just powerful. And for me, the only film that I can say that ever measured, even like kind of measured up to affecting me the way that this one did, was watching the Invisible Man movie before COVID
Okay.
hit and
Yeah.
watching how they interpreted gaslighting and being in a domestic violence relationship with the Invisible
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. That hits. That
So
hits. There was a couple moments when I was writing, and I'm sure this is very similar out in Ohio, but the homelessness problem, like pre and during COVID, was
yeah,
totally out of control. And so you'd see people in a manic state just on the sidewalk all the time. And I always imagine, like, people, in their heads, they're looking at you and they're telling you this story about, like, oh, and then this happened. And then there's this guy with the money. And then also there's this other person. And then there's this girl, Erin, but then she kind of disappears. And as an onlooker, you're like, this person's out of their mind. They're totally crazy. But in their head, it's as true as can be, and they're trying to piece it together. So this was a big thing I was really trying to land, was like the feeling for them. People say, what's the movie really about? I think it's the feeling for them: homeless, drug addict, dealing with psychosis, schizophrenia, living on the street. It feels really real. But when they go to explain the story, when they come to save the day, they've got the duffel bag ready to save the day. And they show me what's in the duffel bag. And you're like, oh, this is a total, they almost feel their story unraveling. And that horror for them must be terrifying, to think that they can't even trust the things that are going on in their head. So yeah, I'll just like more empathy for folks, howling at the moon, living under a freeway underpass. They're going through it.
yeah, I think we're starting to really learn that maybe some of the people that we discounted as being crazy because certain things that they said were crazy, sometimes our reality breaks when we're dealing with big things, but it doesn't detract from certain things happening. I know for me, like I had somebody personally that I knew involved with like the current issue with the files and everything like that. And going back and looking at things that they said to me personally, at the time I discounted them as crazy, but now knowing the context and knowing like what they went through, it's like I wish I would have given them more grace at the time. For retrospect, I was like 18. And growing up in rural Ohio, I didn't really have a sense of like a lot of things. Like life really kind of hit me with a
Yeah.
stick when I went through my domestic violence situation. Like I really had a lot of growing up to do and learning how to be a person, because I was just kind of caught in grief for a lot of years. But going back and looking at the conversations that that person had with me, it now makes sense why they were having those things with me. And so I think this is kind of a big, like, I think people should walk away from this film being encouraged to maybe look at people a little bit deeper and recognize humanity. Because I think
Yes.
sometimes we're just like societally kind of put in this box of we need to look at these people crazy, or we need to not focus on them, like, because they're the outliers, when really in reality they're the people that need more humanity than anybody
That's right.
else.
That's right. I think a lot about the scene in the film where Amy wakes up in Aaron's bed. She wakes up the next morning, and her only memories are the only thing that we see is she's at the photographer's house. Then she's running away in the middle of the woods. Then she wakes up and she has this big argument with her brother. And I think about that a lot, where if someone were to come to you and say, "Hey, I was chilling at this sketchy photographer's house last night, and I don't know, it feels like there was this big shadow that went into my body. I had a nightmare, I guess. And anyways, I woke up somewhere. I don't know how I got home." Listening to that story, you'd be like, "You need to go to the cops. Like, this is not a possession story. This is a domestic violence story." But it's almost furthers the analogy of, she actually thinks she's being followed. She actually thinks that there's this demon that has possessed her, controlling her behavior. And so I always think of that as a good wedge in the film, where you start to not know which one is true, and you have to piece together this story with her of like, wait, was there an attack? Or is this a dream? Or is this actually a possession? Or are all three things true simultaneously? So yeah, what you're saying definitely resonates.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions. Was there any scene that either technically or emotionally that were difficult to kind of
Yeah.
capture
Um,
for this
yeah, I
film?
don't know if we do spoiler alerts. I think when the
That's fine. If you've gotten this far in the episode, we're spoiling it a little bit, but like we're still gonna encourage everybody to go see this.
I mean, I will say this: like, there's as horrifying as I wanted to make the film, when I look back at the first few versions that I wrote, when it was very sort of like vaporous, and it was a more movie about feelings. As a first time writer, you pour your heart into something, you take it to all your good trusted friends, and they read it and they say, "I hate it. I don't understand it. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, dude." And so my reaction to that was like, all right, I need to make this like more grounded, more tangible, and like raise the human stakes, and don't make this a chainsaw film. And so the relationship with Amy and Brian became so important to me, and the stakes in all their conversations. People say, "Oh, listen, this is playing like a drama." It's a crime thriller, clearly, but like, you really care deeply about these two people. And when things go wrong in the film, people that have not seen the film, when they go see it, when things go wrong in the film, that hit me as director harder than any other horrifying scene, because you're like, that's some real shit. And if you can empathize with that moment, that's the most horrifying part of the entire film. So yeah, I think, like, for all the cheesiness that elevated horror has brought to, us and our culture, there's those moments when it's done right, where you're like, I mean, I cover my mouth still when that scene comes on. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I fucking did this. I feel bad. And then Shelby, comes into that scene and delivers a masterclass.
Yeah.
When, like, I feel everything that you're going through right now. So it's like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that scene is probably the biggest scene in the movie that just like gutted me, because you just felt it was just like, no. But you felt it. And like, I like, slashers, like blood and gore, but I like horror movies that make me feel and play on my feelings like that. I think there was just such good character development between Amy and Brian. And so like when that happened, it was just like you were gutted. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that that was such just like a like see that scene, that everything after that scene just like it is the moment where Kylie and I always tease like buckle up, like it
Yeah.
literally like in my mind I was like, oh shit, then this is really where we're about to get in the shit.
This is
Okay,
yep, yep,
Hell
yep.
yeah.
yeah, it was
Because I mean,
very
Brian was the only one like on her side, you know.
Yeah, Brian was the only one on our side. We talked a lot with Taylor as well. So I talked to Gabby. Shout out to Gabby Thomas, who just crushed it as Taylor, about who this person is. And she would tell me her perspective, her own things that she had gone through as Taylor. But it was interesting to watch the two of them on screen and then talk to me about their sort of relationship as characters. And you almost see like, yes, Brian cares for Amy, but Amy thinks that Taylor cares for her. In many ways, Amy sees Taylor as like, man, in a different timeline, if I didn't grow up in a trailer park, my mom wasn't addicted to Oxycontins, I'd probably be just like Taylor, where I could use drugs and I wouldn't be addicted and I always get off scot-free. But I'm not. I'm the other side of Taylor. Everything always goes bad for me. Everything always goes sideways. And then in that scene, we see another reveal where you're like, oh, Taylor is not looking out for Amy. We thought that maybe she was on her side, but she is, in many ways the antagonist in the film. Yeah, it's sad to see. Okay, well, we as the audience care deeply for this character, but no one on screen, especially after that moment, is left to care about her.
I think the relationship between Taylor and Amy is just such an accurate portrayal as to like certain scenarios and friendships you make in using drugs. Like you'll meet somebody and they're just that is your best friend, like you ride for them, all this, that, and the other, and really like they're trying to fuck you over and they do something extremely grimy to you. And it's just a very, very accurate portrayal of like kind of what goes on like with friendships and addiction.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I actually think even deeper, it kind of portrays, whether you meant to or not, I think it very deeply portrays a lot of what women go through with friendships that we think like, okay, this person is here for us. They're there for us. They get us. And then when we experience that switch up of that like face being removed, I think it is so hard because I mean, men do this too, but I think for women, a lot of times more, we emotionally invest so much into our friendships because there are lifelines through so many things. Like I know for Kylie and I, our friendship has been a lifeline through just a lot of shit, being special needs parents, just life, the snowstorm that's happened recently where we're both about to lose our mind and scream and yell at our kids to no end. Like we've been each other's lifeline. Like, bro, I'm going to crash out. Don't do it. Don't do it. Like that kind of friendship. So I think like having that, like where you've invested this into this person and you thought this person, and you've even made choices to choose this person over certain things, and then
Yep.
being confronted with that. That's why I love this, because it really is such a just entendre for not only drug addiction but life. And the thing I loved a lot too was, even though there is like a ghost, the haunting element to this, it's it's not the front story.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like the third or fourth layer of the story. You kind of just let the humanity speak for itself, which I think is such a deeper impact. Like the only film that I think has kind of done something like that well is The Changeling, where grief is kind of like the foreplay. But this is very similar, and a lot of those issues take front, and then you have the possession element. And I like that you kind of did dial back on that, because I do think if you had pushed the possession side of it a little further, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that this is just like a perfect marriage of that. With that being said, how do you see Pieces of Amy fitting within the horror genre, and where do you see it pushing the boundaries of the horror genre?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a great question, especially when it comes to distribution, right? So we're in this. They say you make your movie 3 times, right? When you write it, when you shoot it, and when you edit it, but you actually make it like 5 times. You got to like distribute it, and then like, you got to market it, and like I'm in that latter 2 phases right now, and the communication of the film is really, really important. In many ways, I think horror, branding it horror, can be a distraction because people immediately ground that in Shudder or Screenbox films,
Mhm.
any of those films. But those are a very specific type of genre film. This is not. Um, I was toying with the elevator pitch of like Memento with a horror twist, right? So it's a very different, like to piece this story together. If I was to ask you like what actually happened, it's like it's a lot. And it plays a lot like Memento.
It
Um,
does.
I was talking a lot about like, it's like it'd be like if David Lynch directed True Detective, right? So this is like this really dark, rural story about these terrible things happening. But if David Lynch directed it, it would be kind of like there'd be a Lost Highway component. Um, I'll double click on that. So like even let's say in Lost Highway, the movie opens. Bill Pullman has these VHS tapes are being delivered to his house, and he puts the VHS tapes in. It's videos of his front door, the front of his house, and he gets another one, and it's in the inside of the house. And then he meets the guy at the party, and he goes, "I'm at your house right now. Just call me." And then I remember there's a scene in Lost Highway where they arrest the bad guy, and the warden shows up at the jail cell, and the bad guy's gone, and Bill Pullman's in the cell. And you're like, well, that's impossible. That couldn't have happened. And then the movie just moves on, and there's different characters and different plot line, and you don't see till the end that it all sort of fits into this sort of infinite loop. And I'm like, oh, that motherfucker has tortured us for 2 hours, and he gives us this really unsettling vibe of a story that you can't quite put together. So there's a little bit of like Lynchian element to it. I read a lot of, oh my god, when you run out of ideas and you go back to the well, you watch stuff and you read stuff. I read Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Machado. Great book. Shout out to Carmen Machado. Amazing erotic retelling of all these old horror stories where you're like, is it unsettling because of the horror or because of the erotic parts of these stories? Because the erotic parts are very disturbing. I looked at 12 Monkeys, which is not a horror film, but there is that sort of
Mhm.
loop where you don't know if this person trapped in this psychosis, is he a martyr from the future coming back to save the world from a big virus, or is he just a crazy dude living in an insane asylum? I looked at Destroyer, which is not a horror film with Nicole Kidman. You guys seen Destroyer?
Mhm. I
Really
have, yeah.
so good. And you look at this. I remember coming out of that film being like, I'm so disturbed by this of this woman who like gave her life to being an undercover police officer, and loses her partner, her lover, in a firefight. And no spoilers for folks who have not seen Destroyer. And watching her go in this descent in her life, and there's a scene where she's apologizing to her daughter. Of just be like, I really just want to make things right. I've done so many bad things. I want to do a good thing. And so I'm like, how do I communicate all of this to audiences? And so I would put it in the horror genre. It's definitely for folks who like that kind of Memento, brain teaser type of, zeitgeisty film. Folks that like A24, elevated horror films where you leave, you can watch Blair Witch Project and get really, really creeped out, but there's no feeling that you're like, oh, well, that's actually about something else. There's actually a
Yeah,
meaning. I want people to come out and feel like, oh man, that homeless person I saw onto the freeway, like have a little bit more empathy for what they're going through now. And that they're
exactly.
Yeah, it just you talking about it, it reminds me a lot of like Session 9, where there's a lot that like plays out
Yes.
in that. And then at the end, like you just aren't expecting that that's what happened. And
Yes.
that's to me is like the true hallmark of what's going on. As we're wrapping up, I do like, again, this is a spoiler alert, but I just wanted to know like the ending, it ends where she's making a phone call to the woman's shelter and she's trying to like, it's almost like her coming to terms, and it's left very ambiguous. What made you want to end it that way?
um, just to torture the audience, really, to twist the knife a little bit. I think I can give this description without giving anything away. There's a sense in the film where you don't know if you're watching a horror film or you're watching a thriller. There's a sense that like Amy doesn't really know whether she's living inside of a horror film, she's being followed by a shadow, or whether she's living in a thriller, that she's going through the psychosis but is trying to get the money to save her mom. And then when I wrote and we shot that last scene, I'm like, oh, it's a documentary. And when I was working with my editor, he was just like, we should probably trim this down a little bit. And I was just like, no, because this totally recontextualizes the whole film. And this may sound cruel, but I was just like, people should feel an element of shame for being like, oh, this is a fun roller coaster ride we've been on for an hour and a half, and oh God, I forgot this is people's lived experience. And so the phone call was really meant to like drive that home, like, this wasn't a horror film, this is a documentary you were watching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of, for me, it was like we just brought up Session 9. It was kind of the moment where you like realize at the end, like, oh, that's what's been, or it's like very closely to like Seven, what's in the box, like that
What's in
type
the
of moment.
box?
Like
Yep.
that's what it really reminded me of in the best way possible. But I'm just really grateful. I think we've lost what horror is. And so it makes me sad that like distribution wise that like people do try to put horror so much into such a different kind of box, because there are so many movies that add that in such a different way, but can be so many different things. Like I know
Mhm.
Kylie and I, we just reviewed Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die by Gore Verbinski. And that is a horror film, but it also is so many other things. And I could see why they didn't lean specifically with horror, because I feel like a lot of times it does get boxed in. But that makes me sad, because a lot of the genre is built up on a lot of these films like that we have just talked about. Like there's always been deeper meanings, political meanings, different things like that into films. And you do have your like forward looking slashers, and Shudder has obviously done a lot to like push forward. But I do think we've also gotten the other side of that, where it does make certain things unmarketable because they're not fitting certain boxes. So I really do hope that with films like this and others that we've talked about on this channel, especially this year, like Kylie and I were just talking about the amount of films that like we've already seen this year that have just blown our fucking minds away. Like we have so much faith in the horror genre for this year, because we are already starting out at such a high note, even if there are some lesser spots. So I just think that this is so great. So I know currently right now it is not streaming anywhere, but you are working on that. So as soon as we get the information about where it's streaming or where you can purchase it, we will pass that along to our fan base. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and doing this,
Yes.
because it meant a lot to us and we absolutely loved the film.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for making this movie.
Yeah.
Really.
Great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. For folks out there that are interested, follow along on the progress on Instagram. So it's the Pieces of Amy on Instagram. I'll say to anyone who's out there, making films or thinking about making films, the biggest thing I learned is like, I'm an entrepreneur anyways, outside of, my film life. It's probably one of the biggest examples of like, you have to do things yourself. Of course, you have to find a great DP. You have to find a great actor. You can't also be in front of the camera. You have to find great people along the way. But we're taught to bet on ourselves. We have a vision. we're writing alone, in a dark room, we're writing our screenplay. Most of the filmmaking process is you, and that's it. And then all of a sudden at the end of the process, there's this idea that you just give it over to a distributor and they'll figure out the rest of it. And I would just encourage any filmmaker to be like, no, dude, that's in many ways should be your last resort, especially in the existing, setup in Hollywood, where you're like, what are these distributors actually going to do for me? I can go to Film Hub and I can upload. This is all distributors are doing is they're dragging your file. All filmmakers out there, hope you're listening. They take your file and they drag and drop it into Hulu and to Roku. And then they put out a press release and then they say, okay, what a great job we as distributors have done. So you as a filmmaker need to continue to figure out how to get through to audiences. They're the only people that matter. The only ones that matter. And if you can't get that message through to them, that's part of your job. The marketing, the log line, the elevator pitch, and the trailer. The people who ever watch that shit and be like, dude, I cannot wait to see that. So this will be out on streamers in a couple months. I'm really eager to make the announcement. But yeah, if you're a filmmaker, go get your thing done and don't wait on any other people to make it happen.
Yeah, and please use the resources around us. Like we've been very fortunate that we've had recently some directors reach out to us, but like if anybody doesn't know, we are such proponents of indie films. Like Gavin Michael Booth, that was one of the first people that kind of got me into different filmmaking. But podcasts, getting the word out to people, that's where really I feel like we're trying to kind of revolutionize things here, where we're trying to build an indie network for horror and where we don't have to rely on these things. Because I know, like, even for Kylee and I, there are a lot of times where we don't get access to certain releases because we're in rural Ohio. So like we don't always get the advantage of getting to see things, and then it feels like we're late into the game. So we're really trying, our whole community and our whole idea is building up where we can lift people up. So we will definitely tag you as a collaborator. So anybody who goes on the post that week can go and directly click on it, and it'll take people to all the information, and we will put the information down below. We will have you stick around after the outro so we can get that information from you really quick. But please go and watch this when it comes to streaming. It's a very important piece. And for those of anybody out there who is struggling with addiction, who feels like they are not being seen, addiction, homelessness, any of that, we are going to tag resources down below. We've done this many times before, but please go and visit these resources. You are not alone. There is help out there. And like Kylee and I always say, our DMs are open. We would always love
our DMs are always open.
Yeah. I mean, we're people at the end of the day. So if we could help you, that is the best thing that we could do. So we're not untouchable people. So we're just two moms from Ohio that liked horror and decided to make this a weird side quest of our friendship. But thank you so much, Tim, for coming on.
Yes,
and we greatly appreciate it. But I am Cass and
Kylee.
And we are the Horrorcraft Podcast. And we say bye and stay spooky. Bye.
Bye, stay spooky. Bye.